Welcome to Wrestling Throne. The wrestling world stands at a crossroads, and at the center of this seismic shift is a man who has defined an entire era of professional wrestling. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the undisputed WWE Universal Champion, the head of the table, has been the cornerstone of WWE programming for years. His dominance has been absolute, his reign unquestioned, and his position seemingly unshakable. But as we move deeper into 2025, cracks have begun to appear in the foundation of his empire. The question on everyone's mind is whether the most dominant force in modern wrestling has finally met his match, not just in the ring, but in the court of public opinion and the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. The story of Roman Reigns' rise to power is one of calculated brilliance and undeniable charisma. When he aligned himself with Paul Heyman and embraced his role as the tribal chief, something clicked. The audience that had rejected him for years suddenly found themselves captivated by this new version of the character. He wasn't asking for approval anymore, he was demanding acknowledgement. The transformation was complete when he unified the WWE and Universal Championships, creating a title reign that would stretch across multiple years and countless pay-per-view events. Every challenger fell before him, from legendary veterans to rising stars, and each victory only solidified his position at the top of the mountain. The Bloodline became the most compelling storyline in wrestling, a multi-generational saga that intertwined family loyalty, betrayal, and the pursuit of legacy. Jimmy and Jey Uso stood by his side as the undisputed tag team champions, creating a dynasty that controlled every major championship in WWE. Solo Sikoa emerged as the enforcer, the silent assassin who did the tribal chief's bidding without question. Even when Sami Zayn inserted himself into the family dynamic, the storyline only grew richer and more nuanced. The emotional peaks and valleys of the Bloodline saga gave fans something they could invest in on a deeply personal level, and Roman Reigns was the nucleus around which everything revolved. But dominance in professional wrestling is always temporary, and the longer someone stays on top, the harder the fall becomes when it finally comes. The signs of trouble began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Fans who had been captivated by the tribal chief's ruthless efficiency started to grow tired of the predictability. Every major match seemed to follow the same formula, with interference from the Bloodline ensuring Roman's victory, and while this storytelling device was effective for a time, it eventually became a crutch that undermined the excitement of his matches. The creative team seemed afraid to have him lose cleanly, and this overprotection paradoxically made him seem weaker rather than stronger. The emergence of new stars in WWE has also complicated Roman's position at the top. Cody Rhodes completed his story by winning the undisputed WWE Championship, a moment that fans had been clamoring for and one that felt like a genuine passing of the torch. LA Knight has captured the imagination of the audience with his natural charisma and undeniable star power, creating buzz and excitement that rivals anything Roman has done in recent months. The homegrown talent from NXT continues to impress, bringing fresh matchups and new dynamics that make the roster feel more competitive and unpredictable than it has in years. In this environment, Roman's stranglehold on the main event scene no longer feels necessary or even desirable to many fans. The internal dynamics of the Bloodline itself have become increasingly complicated and potentially damaging to Roman's character. The fractures that appeared when Sami Zayn was kicked out of the family led to one of the most emotionally charged storylines in recent memory, but it also revealed the fundamental weakness in Roman's leadership. He ruled through fear and intimidation rather than genuine respect, and when Jey Uso finally stood up to him, it exposed the tyrannical nature of his reign. The eventual split of the Bloodline, with family members choosing sides and going to war with each other, has diluted the impact of the group that once seemed invincible. Roman finds himself in a position where he has alienated the very people who helped him achieve his dominance, and now he's paying the price for his hubris. The comparison to past lengthy championship reigns is inevitable, and it's not always favorable for Roman. When Bruno Sammartino held the WWE Championship for years, television was different, and fans didn't see him every single week. The mystique remained intact because his appearances were special events. Hulk Hogan's extended runs on top in the 80s were supported by a business model where the champion traveled to different territories, keeping the character fresh in various markets. Even more recent long reigns like those of John Cena or Brock Lesnar had different dynamics, with Cena appearing regularly but facing a constantly rotating cast of challengers, and Lesnar being a special attraction who appeared sporadically. Roman's reign has been characterized by constant television presence with the same supporting cast, which has led to a sense of repetition that even the most compelling character work struggles to overcome. The handling of his championship defenses has also become a point of contention among fans and critics. There's a perception that Roman is being protected to an absurd degree, with finishes that strain credibility and undermine other talent on the roster. When every challenger needs multiple members of the Bloodline to interfere just to create drama in a Roman Reigns match, it sends the message that these challengers aren't really on his level, which then makes it hard to build them up as credible main eventers in the future. The short-term benefit of keeping Roman looking strong has created long-term problems for the overall health of the main event scene. New stars struggle to gain traction because they've been positioned as inferior to Roman, and when he finally does lose, there's a risk that it will feel less like a new star being made and more like Roman finally being allowed to drop the title because creative has nothing left for him. The relationship between Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman has been one of the most successful pairings in modern wrestling, but even this dynamic has shown signs of strain. Heyman's role as the special counsel has given Roman a mouthpiece to express ideas and cut promos that might not come naturally to him, but it's also created a dependency that makes some fans wonder if Roman can sustain his character without that support. Recent storylines have teased dissension between the two, with Heyman's loyalty being questioned and his connections to other powerful figures in WWE creating potential conflicts of interest. If the tribal chief loses his most trusted advisor, can he maintain the aura of invincibility that has defined his reign, or will it be revealed that much of his success was built on the foundation that others provided? The physical toll of his schedule and his style has also become apparent to those who watch closely. Roman has dealt with health issues in the past, and while he's been remarkably durable during this run, there are moments where the wear and tear seems visible. His matches, while still good, don't have the same intensity and energy that they did 2 years ago. The burden of being the top star, carrying the company, and working a full-time schedule while others on his level work part-time has to be exhausting both physically and mentally. There's a legitimate question about how much longer he can maintain this pace, and whether WWE is considering his long-term health and career longevity or simply milking his drawing power while it lasts. The emergence of competition in the wrestling industry has changed the landscape significantly, and Roman's position within that landscape is worth examining. AEW has established itself as a genuine alternative with its own stars and its own identity, and while Roman remains with WWE, the fact that wrestlers now have options has shifted the power dynamics in the industry. Fans have more wrestling content available to them than ever before, which means that even the most dominant WWE star isn't as culturally significant as top stars were in previous eras when WWE had a monopoly on mainstream wrestling attention. Roman can be the biggest star in WWE and still feel less important than Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock did at their peaks, simply because the audience is more fragmented and the competition for entertainment options is more intense. Social media has also played a complicated role in Roman's current situation. On one hand, his character work and the Bloodline storyline have generated tremendous engagement online, with clips and moments going viral and reaching audiences who might not even watch WWE regularly. On the other hand, social media amplifies criticism and gives voice to fans who are tired of his reign, creating echo chambers where negativity can spiral and affect perception. The discourse around Roman has become increasingly polarized, with hardcore supporters defending every aspect of his character and detractors picking apart every segment and match. This polarization might actually be beneficial for WWE in terms of generating conversation and controversy, but it also reflects a genuine division in how fans view the tribal chief's place in the current era. The booking philosophy that WWE has employed during Roman's reign reflects a broader approach to storytelling that has both strengths and weaknesses. The long-term narrative planning that has characterized the Bloodline saga is admirable and has created moments of genuine emotional resonance. Fans appreciate when storylines are given time to breathe and develop naturally rather than being rushed to a conclusion. However, this same commitment to long-term storytelling has also resulted in a certain inflexibility, where the company seems unwilling to audible away from their planned direction even when fan response suggests a different approach might be more effective. Roman's booking has been so heavily tied to this long-term vision that course corrections become difficult, and the entire main event scene can feel stagnant as a result. The question of who should be the face of WWE in 2025 is genuinely complex, and it's not clear that there's a single answer. In previous eras, the company could build around one or two mega stars and structure everything else around them. Today's audience seems to prefer a more ensemble approach, where multiple stars share the spotlight and different wrestlers appeal to different segments of the fan base. Roman's insistence on being the unquestioned head of the table might be at odds with what modern wrestling fans actually want from their programming. They want variety, unpredictability, and the sense that anyone could have a breakout moment on any given night. Roman's dominance, by its very nature, works against these desires, even when the character work is exceptional. The international expansion of WWE and the push into new markets has also affected how Roman's reign is perceived. In some territories, his character resonates strongly and he's treated as the undisputed top star. In others, different wrestlers connect more effectively with local audiences, which raises questions about whether a one-size-fits-all approach to the top of the card still makes sense in a global entertainment company. The streaming era and international distribution deals mean that WWE has to consider diverse audiences with different tastes and preferences, and a monolithic main event scene centered around one character might not be the most effective strategy for maximizing global appeal. The evolution of what fans want from their wrestling heroes has changed dramatically over the past decade, and Roman's character might not perfectly align with current preferences. Modern audiences seem to gravitate toward underdogs, rebels, and characters who feel authentic and relatable rather than larger-than-life supermen who win through dominance and intimidation. There's a reason why wrestlers like Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, and even younger stars with scrappy underdog personas generate such passionate support. Roman's character is powerful and compelling in its own right, but it represents a more traditional approach to wrestling stardom that might feel outdated to portions of the audience. The fact that he's positioned as the ultimate authority figure also puts him on the wrong side of the natural dynamic that wrestling fans prefer, where they root for the challenger against the establishment. The possibility of Roman Reigns taking a break from WWE has been discussed in various reports and would represent a significant shift in the company's landscape. A sabbatical could serve multiple purposes. It would give Roman time to rest and recover from the physical demands of his schedule, allow WWE to refresh their main event scene and elevate new stars, and potentially build anticipation for his return. The absence of the tribal chief might be exactly what's needed to make fans appreciate what he brought to the table and create genuine excitement for his comeback. However, extended absences always carry risk. The wrestling business moves quickly, and taking significant time off means potentially losing momentum and relevance. When Brock Lesnar takes breaks, he remains a special attraction because he was positioned that way from the start of his current run. Roman has been positioned as the workhorse champion, and disappearing for months might undermine that characterization. The creative challenges that await Roman Reigns regardless of what direction his character takes are substantial. If he remains on top, WWE needs to find fresh opponents and storylines that haven't been exhausted during his 4-year run of dominance. If he loses the championship, they need to figure out what a Roman Reigns character looks like without the title and without the bloodline fully intact. Does he pursue championship gold with the same ruthlessness, or does his character evolve into something different? Does he acknowledge his mistakes and try to repair relationships with family members, or does he become even more tyrannical and isolated? These are fascinating creative questions, but they're also challenging to answer in ways that will satisfy a fan base that has diverse and often contradictory preferences about what they want from this character. The legacy that Roman Reigns will leave when his career eventually ends is still being written, and how the next chapter unfolds will significantly impact how he's remembered. There's no question that this run as the Tribal Chief will be considered one of the defining periods in modern WWE history. The question is whether it will be remembered as a genuinely great championship reign that elevated the entire company, or whether it will be seen as a period where one star was prioritized at the expense of the broader roster and long-term health of the main event scene. History tends to be kind to long championship reigns when they're viewed in retrospect, and many of the criticisms that seem important in the moment fade away when people remember the highlights and iconic moments. But history is also influenced by how the story ends, and if Roman's reign concludes with a whimper rather than a bang, it could color perception of everything that came before. The comparison between Roman Reigns and The Rock continues to be both a blessing and a curse for the tribal chief. Being related to one of the biggest crossover stars in entertainment history provides instant credibility and connection to WWE's legacy, but it also creates impossible expectations. The Rock's charisma was so natural and his connection with the audience so immediate that he became a phenomenon that transcended wrestling in a way that very few performers ever have. Roman has worked incredibly hard to develop his own identity and character, and the tribal chief persona is distinctly different from anything The Rock ever did. However, the shadow of his cousin's success still looms large, and there will always be fans who compare them unfavorably, pointing out that The Rock achieved mainstream cultural relevance that Roman has not matched despite being positioned as the top star for so long. The business metrics surrounding Roman's reign tell an interesting and somewhat complicated story. WWE's financial performance during his time on top has been extraordinary, with record revenues from media rights deals, live events, and merchandise sales. The company's stock price and overall valuation have soared, making shareholders and executives extremely happy. However, it's difficult to attribute all of this success specifically to Roman Reigns rather than to broader trends in media rights valuations, the recovery from the pandemic, and the overall growth of WWE as a global entertainment brand. Roman has certainly been a part of this success, but whether he's been the driving force or simply the most visible performer during a period when WWE would have succeeded regardless is a matter of debate that probably can't be definitively settled. The fan response to Roman's matches at major pay-per-view events has been mixed, which is unusual for someone positioned as the clear top star in the company. Some of his matches have been genuinely excellent and received universal acclaim, demonstrating his growth as an in-ring performer and his ability to deliver on the biggest stages. Other matches have been criticized for being overbooked, going too long, or relying too heavily on interference and shenanigans rather than clean wrestling action. This inconsistency in match quality and fan response creates uncertainty about whether his matches are must-see attractions or obligations that fans sit through because he's in the main event spot rather than because they're genuinely excited about the matches themselves. A truly transcendent top star should consistently deliver matches that feel like the highlight of any card, and there are questions about whether Roman has achieved that consistency. The role of nostalgia in wrestling and how it affects current stars cannot be overlooked when discussing Roman's position. Wrestling fans often romanticize the past and hold current performers to unrealistic standards based on misremembered or idealized versions of previous eras. Roman has had to compete not just against his contemporaries but against the mythologized versions of Stone Cold, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, and other legends that fans carry in their memories. This makes it nearly impossible for any current star to measure up in the eyes of certain segments of the audience, no matter how good their work actually is. Roman's reign has been objectively successful by almost any measurable standard, but it will never feel as special to some fans as the title reigns they watched when they were younger and more easily impressed by the spectacle of professional wrestling. The relationship between Roman Reigns and Vince McMahon's vision for WWE versus Triple H's vision as the current head of creative is worth examining. Roman was very much Vince's choice as the face of the company, someone who fit the traditional mold of what a WWE champion should look like and represent. Under Triple H's leadership, there seems to be more willingness to push a diverse array of talent and less emphasis on protecting one single star above all others. This shift in creative philosophy doesn't mean that Roman is being depushed or disrespected, but it does mean that he's no longer automatically guaranteed to be the most protected and prominently featured performer on every show. This change reflects a broader evolution in how WWE thinks about building its brand and creating stars, and Roman's role within that new paradigm is still being defined. The physical presentation and character evolution of Roman Reigns throughout his time as tribal chief has been subtle but significant. The way he carries himself, his facial expressions, his timing in promos, and his in-ring psychology have all improved and become more nuanced over time. He's learned how to maximize the impact of every movement and gesture, understanding that less can be more when you have the audience's attention. The slow burn of his character development, from the silent assassin in The Shield to the rejected babyface to the final form as the tribal chief, represents a journey that few wrestlers get the opportunity to take on such a grand stage. Whether fans appreciate the destination or feel that the journey took too long and wore out its welcome is a matter of personal preference, but there's no denying that Roman has put in the work to develop his craft. The supporting cast around Roman has changed over time, and each iteration has brought different dynamics to his character. Paul Heyman brought legitimacy and verbal brilliance. The Usos brought family loyalty and tag team excellence. Solo Sikoa brought muscle and intimidation. Sami Zayn brought humor and heart. Each of these performers contributed to making the Bloodline storyline work, and their efforts sometimes outshone Roman's own contributions. This raises an interesting question about whether Roman's success is primarily due to his own talent and charisma, or whether he's been the beneficiary of exceptional supporting players who made him look better than he might have looked on his own. The truth is probably somewhere in between, as all successful wrestling acts require both a strong lead performer and effective supporting characters, but it's a discussion worth having when evaluating his place in wrestling history. The future of WWE's main event scene with or without Roman Reigns at the center of it presents both opportunities and challenges. If he steps back from the spotlight, there's a chance for other stars to step up and fill that void, potentially creating a more dynamic and unpredictable top of the card. Wrestlers like Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Drew McIntyre, and others have demonstrated that they can carry significant storylines and deliver in high-profile matches. The younger generation coming up from NXT brings fresh energy and different styles that could revitalize the main event scene. However, there's also risk in moving away from someone who has been the most consistent draw and the most reliable performer at the top of the card for years. WWE might discover that the alternatives aren't as effective or that the audience misses having one clear top star around which everything else revolves. The merchandise sales and marketing potential of Roman Reigns has been leveraged extensively during his reign, with shirts, replica titles, and other items bearing his likeness and catchphrases. The "Acknowledge Me" tagline has become ubiquitous in WWE marketing, and Roman's image has been used to promote everything from video games to international tours. This commercial success is undeniable and represents real value to WWE as a business. However, there's a question about whether this level of merchandise dominance is sustainable long-term, or whether fans will eventually tire of seeing the same image and slogans everywhere they look. The freshness and novelty that initially drove sales might give way to oversaturation, and WWE needs to be careful about not killing the golden goose by overexposing their top star to the point where he becomes part of the furniture rather than a special attraction. The way Roman Reigns has been used to transition WWE from the old model of weekly television to the new era of streaming and premium live events has been masterful in some ways and problematic in others. His presence as a constant feature on both weekly programming and special events has provided continuity and star power that helped establish WWE's streaming platforms as essential subscriptions for fans. However, this ubiquity has also contributed to the sense of oversaturation that some fans complain about. In the old territory days, fans might have seen their top champion in person only a few times a year, making each appearance special. In the pay-per-view era, champions appeared monthly at special events, but their weekly television appearances could be limited or strategic. In the current streaming era, fans can watch Roman multiple times per week across different platforms, and that level of exposure makes it harder to maintain mystique and special attraction status. The health of Roman Reigns, both physical and mental, is something that should be considered when discussing his future. He's been open about his battle with leukemia and his triumph over the disease, which makes him an inspirational figure beyond just his wrestling character. The physical demands of being the top star in WWE are immense, and the schedule, while lighter than it was in previous decades, is still grueling. The mental and emotional toll of being in the spotlight constantly, dealing with fan criticism and the pressure to perform at the highest level every single night, cannot be underestimated. WWE has a responsibility to protect the long-term health and well-being of their performers, and that includes being willing to give Roman breaks when needed and not running him into the ground simply because he's the most marketable star on the roster. The evolution of wrestling storytelling and how Roman's character fits into modern narrative structures is worth analyzing. Traditional wrestling storytelling relied on simple good versus evil dynamics with clear heroes and villains. Modern storytelling tends to be more complex, with shades of gray and characters who have understandable motivations even when they do terrible things. Roman's tribal chief character exists in this gray area, doing villainous things but with an internal logic and family loyalty that makes sense from his perspective. This moral complexity makes for richer storytelling but can also create confusion among fans about how they're supposed to feel about the character. Some fans appreciate the nuance, while others just want clear heroes to cheer for and villains to boo. Roman's positioning in this middle ground might be too sophisticated for portions of the audience who prefer more straightforward dynamics. The training and preparation that Roman Reigns puts into his craft has clearly evolved over the years. His matches show greater psychology and storytelling than they did earlier in his career, suggesting that he's studied the art form and learned from both his own experiences and from watching other great performers. The way he builds matches, creates near falls, and manipulates crowd reactions demonstrates an understanding of wrestling fundamentals that not all performers possess, even at the highest level. However, there's still room for growth and improvement, particularly in terms of match pacing and diversifying his moveset to create more varied and unpredictable matches. The greatest wrestlers continue learning and evolving throughout their entire careers, and Roman will need to keep pushing himself creatively if he wants to remain relevant as the business continues to change around him. The relationship between Roman Reigns and the WWE Universe, as the company calls its fanbase, has been complicated throughout his entire run. From the initial rejection as a babyface to the eventual embrace as the tribal chief, the journey has been marked by passionate reactions both positive and negative. What's interesting is that even as the tribal chief character has been more accepted, there's still an undercurrent of resistance from fans who remember being told to cheer for him when they didn't want to, or who resent the way he's been positioned above everyone else on the roster. This historical baggage affects how every current storyline is received, and it may never fully go away no matter what direction his character takes. Wrestling fans have long memories, and they don't forget when they feel like their preferences have been ignored or dismissed by the company. The international appeal of Roman Reigns varies significantly by market, which is important for a global company like WWE to consider. In some countries, his character resonates strongly and he's received as the undisputed top star. In other markets, different wrestlers generate more excitement and merchandise sales. This geographic variation in popularity suggests that while Roman is certainly a top star by any measure, he may not have achieved the truly universal appeal that the absolute biggest stars in wrestling history possessed. This doesn't diminish his accomplishments, but it does provide context for understanding his place in the broader history of the business and why some fans might question whether he's been as dominant and successful as WWE's promotional materials suggest. The way Roman Reigns has been protected from losses and how that affects the perceived competitiveness of the roster is one of the most controversial aspects of his reign. Wrestling works best when fans believe that any match could go either way, even if intellectually they know that certain outcomes are more likely than others. When one performer goes years without losing clean, it undermines this suspension of disbelief and makes matches feel predetermined in a way that hurts investment in the outcomes. Roman's booking has sometimes crossed the line from protecting him as the champion to making him feel invincible in a way that drains tension from his matches. Legendary champions of the past would occasionally lose non-title matches or be vulnerable in ways that made their eventual title defenses feel more dramatic. Roman's booking has often lacked this strategic vulnerability, which paradoxically makes him seem weaker as a character because the company feels the need to stack the deck so heavily in his favor. The potential for Roman Reigns to eventually transition into a part-time or special attraction role similar to Brock Lesnar or John Cena in recent years is something that may be in his future. This type of role can extend a wrestler's career, preserve their drawing power, and allow them to appear at major events while recovering between appearances. For Roman, who has worked a full-time schedule during his entire reign as tribal chief, such a transition could provide needed rest while also potentially making his appearances feel more special and event-worthy. However, this transition needs to be handled carefully, as fans can turn on part-timers who they feel are taking spots from full-time performers or who appear only to win matches and then disappear again. The timing of such a transition and how it's presented will be crucial to maintaining Roman's status and legacy. The creative team behind Roman's storylines deserves both credit and scrutiny for how his character has been handled. When the Bloodline saga has hit its peaks, it's been some of the most compelling storytelling in wrestling, full of emotion, drama, and genuine surprises that kept fans engaged. When it's missed the mark, it's often because the storytelling has become repetitive, the interference finishes have become predictable, or the pacing has dragged storylines out longer than necessary. The challenge for any creative team is maintaining freshness and excitement over an extended period, and while they've largely succeeded with Roman's character, there have been enough missteps along the way to generate legitimate criticism. The best wrestling creative teams know when to pull the trigger on a storyline conclusion and when to extend it further, and there have been times when the decisions around Roman's booking have felt driven more by a desire to protect him than by what would make for the most satisfying story. Thank you for joining us here at Wrestling Throne as we examined the current state of Roman Reigns and his position in WWE. The Tribal Chief's journey has been one of the most significant storylines in modern wrestling, and while opinions differ on its ultimate success, there's no denying that it has shaped the company and generated passionate discussion among fans worldwide. Whether Roman Reigns has truly lost his throne or is simply evolving into the next phase of his legendary career remains to be seen, but the conversation around his legacy and his future will continue to dominate wrestling discourse for years to come. We appreciate you spending time with us exploring these complex questions about one of wrestling's most polarizing and important figures. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and like to stay updated on all the latest wrestling news, analysis, and discussions right here at Wrestling Throne.